All right, so hello and welcome to the Museum of Discovery and Science Distinguished Speaker Series, brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We have a very special program. Just a quick note up front, the panel discussion about sea turtle conservation that was originally scheduled has been postponed until January. But in lieu of that, turtle lovers, do not be weary. We have a very special guest, friend of mods and very prolific scientist, Dr. Derek Burkholder, with us. But just before we get started with him, just to go over the rules with everybody, we are going to keep everybody's microphones muted. Feel free to have your cameras on. It's always nice to see people's faces, especially for a presenter, to not just kind of present to a blank screen, but you know, feel free to keep your anonymity, whatever makes you comfortable, but it's always great to interact. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. And at the end, there will be about 15 minutes or so to just go over those questions with our guest, and we can have a discussion about his research. And we will, so at any point in the evening, just put those questions in the chat. And thank you again for joining us. We will get started in just a couple minutes, but just to introduce our guest tonight, we have Dr. Derek Burkholder, who is from Nova Southeastern University, the director of the Marine Environmental Education Center at the Carpenter House in Hollywood, Florida, and part of the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program, and also a research scientist with the Guy Harvey Institute and the Save Our Seas Shark Center, studying local shark communities. Dr. Burkholder got his PhD from Florida International University, studying local seagrass communities, which are important to pretty much everything that lives in the ocean around here, very vital habitats. And a very good friend of the museum and everybody around here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest tonight, Dr. Derek Burkholder. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and it's great to see everybody tonight. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I'm going to give you just kind of a little bit of a run through on some of the different research projects, monitoring projects, and introduce you to the Carpenter House as well if you guys are not familiar yet with our center down here. But just talk to you a little bit about some of the sea turtle research that we've got going on right here in South Florida. So thank you again, Mods and Brady, for having me on here tonight. It's great to be here. So I am going to kind of share a screen. I've got a PowerPoint with lots of photos and videos and fun stuff like that. But you can see behind me here, I am sitting in the Marine Environmental Education Center right now. I'm in our main education area, or our education room. So we use a lot of our specimens, things like skulls, things like this green turtle skull right here, to learn a little bit about the different species we've got. This is just to kind of show a comparison. We've got a green turtle versus a loggerhead right next to it. These would be about the same size animal. You can see this loggerhead skull is much, much, much larger. And that's really based on the diet that this guy has. The loggerheads are really going after those crunchy things, things like oysters, clams. They've got this great big head full of muscle to be able to crush those things, where a green turtle is feeding mostly on seagrasses and algae. So their skull, they've got more of a serrated beak to it, where they can actually use that to cut away at the seagrasses and algae that they're trying to feed on the bottom. So, you know, we use things like these carapace, the shells, carapaces, as well as these skulls, to just learn a little bit more about these animals here at the center and through some of our education programs. So, you know, the center here, we're going to learn a little bit more. I've got a little video just to kind of introduce you and give you a brief tour around here. But we opened our doors in March of 2017, and we are open to the public center normally. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we are closed right now, and we are also hosting an education series. So if you guys have any interest, much like we're doing tonight, we are hosting a whole series of speakers of different marine, terrestrial, all kinds of different topics, everything from seabirds to sharks, coral reefs, seagrasses, octopus, everything else in between, obviously lots of sea turtles as well. So those are every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you guys are interested, please take a look at our Facebook page for those links for those Zoom meetings as well. But right now, just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to share my screen so I can show you kind of what some of these other things we're working on. All right, so hopefully this will work. If you guys have any issues, please let me know. And like Brady said, I am very fortunate that I am linked to a lot of different programs here at Nova Southeastern University. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about some of our sea turtle work, but I also do a lot of work with sharks and sort of community dynamics and things like that. Everything from looking at the top down, how sharks impact all the way down to the seagrass beds, as well as looking at sea turtle movements, shark communities, things like that. So like I said, very fortunate to work with a lot of fantastic people. And that is based right here at the Nova Southeastern University Halmos College of Arts and Sciences. So I am based at the Oceanographic Center. You can see our new building here. We're at in the end of what used to be John U. Lloyd State Park, the Mizell Eula Johnson State Park now. But we're right there at Port Everglades. So if you guys see this building, this is part of Nova Southeastern University, and it's really a leading research entity in these marine sciences. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to be part of this amazing group here at the college. And as Brady said, I do work with the Guy Harvey Research Institute, as well as the Save Our Sea Shark Center here at NSU. And we, are studying sharks and billfish and other things around the world, as well as our local shark communities right here in South Florida. Our local program, we also are, I'm very excited again, not right this moment, but normally we have programs where we actually bring people out with us on the boat and get people involved and actually doing this hands-on shark research. You can be catching, tagging, measuring these sharks, all 100% hands-on. So when things settle down, I hope that you guys will reach out. And those trips are largely taking school groups out. So we can take up to 30 people on the boat, 8 years old and up. So it's a lot of fun. And like I said, 100% hands-on, where we really like to get people out and really immersed in this amazing environment that we have right here in our backyard. But tonight, like I said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about some of our sea turtle work. So again, with NSU, we're very fortunate to partner with Broward County on a couple of different programs. We've been working with Broward to facilitate the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program. This is something that's funded and administered by Broward County Natural Resources Department, but the NSU team has been the boots on the ground and actually doing this work for the last 30 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that program looks like. And then obviously, like I said, I'm sitting right now here in the Marine Environmental Education Center. And this is a new partnership, a relatively new partnership between NSU and Broward County Parks Department. So like I said, the Carpenter House, we're normally open to the public from Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5. Right now we are closed, so we're doing as much as we can online. Take a look at our Facebook and Instagram, social media, things like that. So we're doing a lot of online programming. We do offer that to school groups as well, if we have any teachers out there tonight. But a lot of the work that we're doing normally is based right here at the house, and we have it open to the public. Lots of great exhibits, number of live animals on site, including Captain, our resident sea turtle. And then we do obviously normally bring school groups here as well. So just, because we can't be here tonight, I do want to give you just a little bit of an introduction to what our property looks like, what we normally have here. And so I'm going to just run a little video here. We're going to have Carly, one of our amazing education staff here, just to give you a little bit of about a 5-minute run through of what our center looks like. So just, if you have any issues hearing this.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Marine Environmental Education Center at the Carpenter House, or what we like to call it, the MEEC. The MEEC is a partnership between Broward County Parks and Nova Southeastern University, so it's part historic home and part nature center. The Carpenters, they used to live here. Hank Carpenter built this house in 1941, and him and his wife June actually moved down here full time in the 1960s. They were very aware of environmental things going on. They were very politically active, and they were very involved in their community. So when Mrs. Carpenter passed away in 2001, she put the house in a trust and said whoever buys it has to stay as is and it has to benefit the community somehow. So when Broward County Parks bought it in 2004, it was just operating as a historic home until Nova Southeastern partnered with them. And now we have the MEEC, which opened in March of 2017. So follow me inside. We're going to take a quick tour of the building. All right, you guys, so now we're in the sunroom of the main house, up in the Carpenter house, and these are our little guys. So once people found out we had a turtle, they thought we took all of the turtles. So these guys either were injured or they were pets and they were deemed non-releasable, so they got dropped off at our door. So now they've become our conservation ambassadors. So we have our red-eared slider, our Florida box turtle, and our diamondback terrapin. All right, this is our interpretive center. We have a couple things going on, like research being done at Nova, different things about invasive species here in Florida, and a really cool turtle tracking little interactive exhibit. So if you want to follow me this way, we'll check it all out. So this actually used to be used for the in-laws because the Carpenters would keep them separate and whenever they came to visit. And we just kind of reworked it a little bit so that people can come in and just kind of view all these things. We are a self-guided tour when we're open to the public, so you just kind of come in and view on your own time. We have active research being done at Nova Southeastern University on coral, especially spawning coral and then transplanting it into the ocean on the Florida Reef and also in the Bahamas. And then we also have another lab that works with lionfish. So lionfish are a really big invasive species here in Florida. They have caused huge issues out in our ecosystems. So we're just trying to learn a little bit more about them and then how we can kind of manage that population, because it's probably impossible to eradicate them, but if we can kind of limit them in a way. We touch on lionfish again, as well as the Burmese python, which are invasive in the Everglades. And the National Save the Sea Turtle Foundation, they actually help us out a lot. They're one of our sponsors. They help us with our education programs, and they are a fantastic organization just saving those reptiles. You'll notice when we go out to the courtyard, we have a lot of artivism, so marine trash sculptures. So we do a lot of beach cleanups. This one here is done by Stoked on Salt, artist Lisa Maselli. So we go out, we clean up the beaches, and then we actually use that to make art, just to show what we're doing as humans has a huge impact on all of our ecosystems, and just kind of trying to bring awareness to that single-use plastics. So one of the things, we are a sister organization of Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program. They are the people who are up and down the beaches during nesting season here in Broward County monitoring the nests. They also tag their turtles. So you can kind of see up here, we have a satellite tracker, but we don't really know a lot about these animals. They are solitary in the wild, and once they're out, they just kind of swim. We don't know what's really happening because they just hang out by themselves. So we do track these sharks and turtles as well. So you can, when you're here, you can come through, click one of the sharks, and you can actually kind of follow their path, which I think is super cool, because a lot of them actually come right in the water off of Florida, where we are right here. And then you can just kind of play around, figure out where it is, when it was there, things like that. Of course, we have some skulls and some fossils from local creatures. So we have bird skulls right here, so a lot of our seabirds that we have. We also have a lot of turtle things, obviously. So we have some skulls, we have some carapaces. This one is my personal favorite, so this is what it would look like underneath the ground. This is actually what the nest looks like. It's an upside-down light bulb. And then when they begin to hatch, it's like that elevator motion. So as the hatchlings move up, the sand goes down, and then they just rise to the top, which is really cool. Florida horsecock, so our native shell. We also have some coral samples right here, and then a really cool green sea turtle right there as well. Behind you guys right here is a TED, or a turtle excluder device. So back in, all 7 species are endangered or threatened. And a big thing that threatened their population was bycatch. So bycatch is when you're going to catch something, but you accidentally catch something else. So the turtles, unfortunately, they were a huge bycatch in the fishing industry with the big shrimp trawls and the fish trawls, like you can see right here. So the TEDs, or the turtle excluder devices, they were started being implemented in the late 80s, early 90s, and they actually have a 98.3 success rate. You can kind of see right here, they're teaching those turtles how to work their ways out of there. So if they already get caught in a trawling net, they can actually find the exit and swim out. So they won't be bycatch anymore. So there was a lot of testing done just to make sure what design would work for turtles, and if they could figure out how to do it by themselves. So really cool footage we have right here. And then more just on turtle rehab. So this turtle also had an injury to her shell, similar to what our turtle Cassie has. So it's just a whole bunch of resources just to learn about turtles. So follow me this way. We're going to go check out Captain. All right, you guys. So this is Captain. Captain. She is our resident green sea turtle. She is the star of the show. Captain is between the ages of 17 and 19. She is here because she was struck by a boat about 10 years ago. And when she was struck by the boat, her injuries were so extent that she was determined to be a non-releasable turtle. She has a whole bunch of microbubbles in the back of her shell. So without that backpack on, she'd actually have what we call bubble butt. So her tail would be up in the air, her face would be down. That backpack is weighted, so it just keeps her neutrally buoyant in the water so that she can swim and then surface like a normal turtle. So she is a great resource to have. We actually do a public feeding every afternoon at 3:30, and we also have her for a great resource when we do school programs. So we usually work with Broward County schools. We'll also work with Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, homeschool groups, 4-H, things like that. So a lot of people just love being able to see a turtle and learn about it. So come check us out and learn more about Captain. Hi, everyone.
All right. So again, that was just a bit of an introduction to the MEEC. Like I said, we've got a lot of different programs going on here normally, but right now, much of our work is focused on that seminar series every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. If you guys are interested, I hope you can check it out, log in and see what we're talking about each week. So now I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the work of the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program. So just some turtle facts in general. Here in South Florida, we are an incredibly important nesting ground for sea turtles. So there are 7 different species of sea turtles worldwide. We actually get 5 of those 7 here in South Florida. So on our nesting beaches, we get the loggerhead sea turtle, the green sea turtle, and then the leatherback, which is the largest of all the sea turtles still alive to get today. The leatherbacks can get up to about 7 feet long and upwards of 2,000 pounds. They are, because of that leathery shell, these guys feed almost exclusively on jellyfish and other gelatinous items out in the ocean. So you can imagine how much of those they have to eat to be able to support a 2,000 pound body just eating jellyfish, which of course is largely water. But doing that, these guys are out in the open ocean. They dive to incredibly deep depths to be able to do that. The green sea turtles, as we talked about before, looking at that skull, they're feeding on mostly seagrass and algae. They get that green sea turtle name because their diet actually dyes the fat inside green. So, if these get cut into or anything like that, you can see that green, and that's how they actually got that name originally. And then the loggerhead, of course, gets that name because of that great big head that they've got to crush those oysters and clams and lobster and things like that they love to eat. Offshore, we also have the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle and then the hawksbill. The hawksbill has a nice pointed beak. These guys specialize on eating sponges. So they've got that pointed beak. They can actually go in and pick little sponges out of the reef. And we do see them pretty often here in South Florida on our reef track. So like I said, Florida is a very, very important nesting ground, especially for the loggerhead. This loggerhead population in the Northwest Atlantic is the largest nesting population of loggerheads in the world. And 90% of those nest on Florida beaches. So that we are an incredibly, incredibly important nesting ground for these guys. And so it's really great to be able to be out there and working with these endangered species here. So much of the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program is based on the nesting beach. So we go out, these guys, like I said, of those 7 species, all of our sea turtle species worldwide are either threatened or endangered, largely due to human impacts. Now they are all federally and state protected species here in the US, and in many places around the world, they are very heavily protected. And much of the conservation really focuses on a number of different fronts, everything from the nesting surveys to understand kind of what's going on with our population, to many of the amazing rehab centers that operate in Florida and in many places around the world to try to bring back some of these animals that are injured, just like Captain that was hit by a boat. Those rehab centers are what are, allowing these animals to live. Many of these animals are then being released back into the wild again. Stranding response to get those injured sea turtles to those rehab centers or to get released back into the wild. And really education, turtle excluder devices, many of these other conservation efforts that are going in, all working together to try to help these endangered and threatened animals around the world. So, unfortunately, these animals do face a lot of different threats worldwide. And one of those is predation. And of course, that's going to be a natural threat, predation on land. So when these females come up on land, they're laying their eggs, the eggs incubate, and then the hatchlings leave and head back to the water. But while they're on land, they are, unfortunately predated on by a number of different things. We got things like foxes will go after not only the eggs, but also the hatchlings when they're coming out. You can see this raccoon here has got a sea turtle egg in his hands. Ghost crabs will come after the hatchlings as they're moving down the beach. Shorebirds, pets, ants, all kinds of different things will go after these little hatchlings. Unfortunately, those hatchlings are perfect little snack size for many, many things out there. And so they really do have a pretty big high risk of predation. For at sea, for these hatchlings, we've got seabirds, even some of our large fish out there, like this mahi-mahi, are just full of these little baby sea turtles. Because again, these are in areas, they're out in the sargassum and the floating seaweed out there, which is also where a lot of these fish are hanging out because there's so much food there. So they are predated on pretty regularly. As they get to adult size, the predation risk goes down a little bit because they've got that great big heavy bony shell that does protect them pretty well. But when you have a large shark, something like a tiger shark or a great white, these animals can still go after even the adult sea turtles. But for the natural predation, that's really going to be one of the biggest threats that they have. But you can see in these couple of pictures here, you've got the turtle kind of turns its back to the shark and is doing little circles around the shark. And that's one of the ways they have, as long as they can see that shark, many times they can get away because they turn their back to them. The shark can't get a good bite on anything because they just slide off of that shell. The times where they really have issues is when the animals get sick or slow or something like that, or if they are, sleeping or something, get surprised by the shark, they might have a little more of an issue. Unfortunately, that predation is just one of many, many issues that are threatening sea turtles right now. The rest of those are generally going to be our fault, all right? Human impacts are very, very significant impacts for sea turtles. One of the things that drove many of our species to near extinction and to these low threatened and endangered numbers around the world, it was overharvesting. So this picture right here is all shells of sea turtles that have been harvested for their meat. There are reports that when the first ships were coming to the US and around the Caribbean, there are logs saying that you could almost walk to shore on the back of sea turtles because there were so many of them in the water. Unfortunately, they also made great food. So they would catch these turtles, they would keep them on their boats for months at a time to be able to have fresh meat and things like that. And unfortunately, that overharvesting really devastated the population. However, luckily in 1973, the Endangered Species Act did protect and stop all killing, harming, and harassment of sea turtles worldwide. The IUCN Red List in 1982 also listed them, and now they're on the CITES list, the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, as an Appendix 1, so one of the highest levels of protection, as well as the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species. And so these are all ways, locally and globally, how sea turtles are being protected through legislation right now. Unfortunately, we do still see some poaching. This is, in some parts of the world, this can be very heavy. They'll take both the eggs and as well as the adults for oil, leather, shells, food for the meat and the eggs, things like that. They have been, some species, especially the hawksbill sea turtle, has been targeted pretty heavily for this absolutely beautiful shell that they have. They make great, they've been harvested as jewelry, wall hangings, tortoiseshell, necklaces, bracelets, earrings, things like that. So, unfortunately, this is something that does still happen today, and not so much in the US, can be found, but in many other parts of the world, you can a lot of times find these things, even if it is illegal, you can still find them and purchase and things like that. So you got to really be pretty wary on what you're buying, even when you're traveling, that these are still threatened endangered species, not something that we really want to be working with. One of the other big issues that sea turtles face is coastal development. Obviously, here in South Florida, we love to live near the beach, near the ocean. That's why we're here. And that's sort of the same thing around the world. But that does cause a lot of habitat loss. If anybody local here knows Port Everglades, this is here in Fort Lauderdale, the large port. This is what it looked like in 1928. You can see these large, expansive beaches on both sides of the inlet here. This is obviously where they were actually actively dredging at that time, trying to make the inlet to bring some of these larger ships in. What this looks like today, a little bit different. All right, we've got obviously everything built up all around it. You can see that expansive beach is almost gone. There's very, very little, and this is all lost nesting habitat for these animals, as well as any impact that's happened offshore from dredging and tearing up these areas over time. Many of the things that we do to make living on the coast possible, well, things like coastal armoring, seawalls, rock revetments where we're putting in rock to keep the sand from going away, as well as some of these large piers and things like that. These all kind of create issues for the natural movement of sand. So what would be this sand moving down the coastline is stopped here. You can see with these rock revetments, we get these scalloping in our beaches. This used to be like from that early picture, that used to be sand all the way out to here, all beautiful sea turtle nesting habitat. And now it's much, much smaller and goes away pretty regularly. So this habitat loss is a big problem for our sea turtles around the world. Causes a lot of erosion as well as just natural erosion to our beaches. Again, you can see this huge cliffing area here where maybe a storm had come in or something like that, and it's taken all of that sand as well as all that natural habitat away from where these animals might have laid their nest originally. This you can see, so this was one of our nests, and this was after a storm or maybe one of these big high tide, these king tides like we just had recently here in South Florida. We got a lot of, our beaches took a little bit of a beating, and sometimes this kind of thing can happen. This is actually a cliffing area here where that sand has been pulled away and has actually exposed this whole clutch of eggs right here. So that's a whole sea turtle nest that's been exposed. Some of those eggs have possibly washed away, and another high tide, probably that whole nest would have been washed away if we hadn't been able to relocate it. So this kind of loss can really impact some of our sea turtles as well. And then light pollution. If you're in South Florida, you'll see signs all up and down A1A that talk about sea turtle nesting season. And that's talking about turning our lights down or changing the color of the bulbs. This sea turtle friendly lighting is something that we want to keep our fixtures low to the ground. So we're not lighting up areas that don't need to be lit up. We want to keep sort of a red or amber LED color to our lights because that's something that doesn't impact our sea turtles quite as much. And also keep our lights shielded and directed to only those places that need to be lit up rather than maybe like a globe fixture, which kind of puts, a circle light everywhere. That creates sky glow, creates a lot of issues. And the big reason for that is this artificial lighting spills out onto the beach. And where that is an issue for sea turtles is that sea turtles use that brighter sky to orient and ideally should be getting them back to the water. Before all this artificial lighting came in, the sun and moon reflecting off the water would have been the brightest horizon. So they would have either come up on the beach to lay their eggs, or the hatchlings would have come out of the ground and they would have gone to that bright horizon, taking them right back to the water. But now that street light or something like that may bring that sea turtle over to A1A, might bring it to somebody's swimming pool, something like that, and really can have a big impact on these animals. It may cause them to become exhausted, crawling around on the beach, not making it back to the water where they need to be. You can imagine like that leatherback, 2,000 pounds. It's not really built to be on land. It's built to be in the ocean. Dragging itself around the sand can be very, very tiring for these animals. That really does impact these animals in the long term. It causes a lot of disorientation. So like I said, that brighter light on the street light or something like that might pull hatchlings or the nesting females inland rather than getting them back to the water where they need to be. So what that means in sort of in a hatch out situation. So this is looking at the nest. So this is after a nest is hatched. You can see this would have been the egg chamber here. All these little flipper prints are the babies that came out and went right back down to the ocean. This is what we would expect on a nice dark beach where that is working the way it's supposed to. They're going to go to the brighter horizon over the water. Unfortunately, in areas of a lot of light, this is more what we would see. You know, our nest, we don't even know where this nest started from. It might have been actually over, you know, kind of up in the corner of this picture. But you can see these flipper prints all over the place, and they're going inland, left, right, up, down, backwards and forwards, and not going to the water where they need to be. And that's really, really big impact on these animals. Obviously, pollution, like everything in the world, pollution is a pretty big impact. Nets in the water, line that they can get tangled up in, plastic bags that these animals will eat, plastic in the ocean is a huge issue. Everything from, you know, a full plastic bag all the way down to those little microplastic as things break up. Talking with some of our rehabilitation center partners, 100%, every single animal that they bring in and necropsy, the ones that have died or whatever that they've worked on, 100% of these sea turtles have plastic in their stomach. So just let that sink in a little bit. 100% of these animals, even from hatchling size that they bring in work on, have plastics in their stomach already. So it's a huge impact on these animals. We also have something for some of our sea turtle species called the Fibropapilloma Virus. You can see here some of these big tumors that are forming. This is something that's been around for many years, but it is not really well known yet what causes it. They do think it's a virus based, but we don't know if it's poor water quality or what exactly starts this process. But they form these tumors. They can be external. You can see this one here on the side. All these tumors around the eyes make it very hard for them to see. They can actually grow them internally as well, so inside their throat or whatever. So it might stop them from eating. If they get too many of them, it can even stop them from swimming and stuff like that. So this fibropapilloma virus is extremely contagious between sea turtles. So the centers that do work on this have very strict protocols on how they work with fibropapilloma patients versus something that might be a boat strike or something like that. But it is another impact on these guys. And then like Captain, our sea turtle here at the MEEC, boat traffic. So we get these boat strike injuries, whether it's getting hit on the shell, like some of these top photos where it's a crush injury, or you can see then things like the propeller strikes, these slices through the shell that can injure or kill many of our sea turtles. These guys are air-breathing animals, so they have to come up to the surface and really can have pretty big impacts on what's going on. On our beaches, even things as simple as beach furniture, they can get entangled in this. You can see this guy here we found on one of our morning surveys was stuck under this stack of chairs, tried to come up to nest, got stuck there and couldn't get out. Other ones, they kind of bowled right over them and made do, but really can be pretty heavily impacted by beach furniture, trash, all these things on the beach. Same thing when you go out, if you're digging those holes on the beach or building sand castles, those can have huge impacts on our sea turtles. You can imagine a hatchling coming out just this big, going down the beach and running into your sandcastle. It might be like running into, a Mount Everest or something like that for this sea turtle. Those sandcastles fill in the holes. Those can, trap hatchlings. It can actually injure or kill moms if they come in and they fall face first into a hole that might break their, hurt them or something like that. They can get stuck there. So it's really important to really pick up after yourselves on the beach as well. And then we saw with that video at the MEEC talking about bycatch. So bycatch is really, if a fishery is out there, maybe looking for tuna, trying to catch tuna, they might have something like a long line going out there, having thousands of hooks out trying to catch tuna, but they also catch sharks. They also catch sea turtles and things that don't make it if they get stuck on these lines. And that bycatch is the unintended catch that also happens in these fisheries. We get a lot of that also with trawl fisheries. So we drag this great big net that catches everything in its path. Something like a fish gets stuck in there, stays in there till you bring it up to the boat. Something like a sea turtle that's an air-breathing animal gets stuck in that net and it can actually drown. So that's where that turtle excluder device that we looked at out in the at the Marine Environmental Education Center, that's something that's a trap door that's been built into these trawl nets to try to help this bycatch issue, where the fish will go through those metal grates, but when something big like a dolphin or a sea turtle hits that, they hit that and get kicked out a little trap door at the top of the net or the bottom of the net, and they continue on their way. The rest of the fish gets caught in the net like we want it to. So there's a lot of work going in to try to minimize some of these threats, but there's a lot of them out there. So one of the things that our program is doing is really looking at the nesting beach and monitoring for trying to get a good understanding of what our population looks like, but also helping some of those hatchlings and things like that that may be in those nests over the course of the season. So our program here in South Florida, in Broward County anyway, we survey from March 1st through the end of October every single year. So we're coming to the end of our sea turtle season. We've had a great one, luckily. But you know, like I said before, this is contracted by Broward County, and NSU is doing a lot of this work on our beaches. All of this work is permitted by Florida Fish and Wildlife because we are working with endangered species. This is all very heavily, you know, we're all trained very well, permitted to be able to do this work. And we are collecting data for the county, state, as well as federal agencies to better understand our sea turtle populations here in Florida. So what does a typical day look like for our program? We start off half an hour before sunrise every single day from March 1st through the end of October. So a lot of very early mornings. We get to the beach, we start traveling. So in Broward, we've got 24 miles of beach that we run every single day, like I said, for those 8 months of the year. And we do that on ATVs. And what we're doing is we're looking, you know, we're traveling up and down our beaches, and we're looking for activity from the nests, you know, the sea turtles that came up on the beach the night before. So all of this nesting behavior is happening generally at night. So what we see here is kind of what we're looking for. This is a crawl of a sea turtle. You can see the flipper prints in the sand. See this big fluffy mound up here where they've actually dug a nest. So we're looking for these crawls, and we're documenting how many animals are here. We're going to mark off the nests that are there to protect them. So we make sure people aren't sticking their umbrellas into the egg chamber. Our beach cleaners aren't running them over and tearing up nests or anything like that. We document something called a false crawl, which is what you see right here. This photo, you can see the sea turtle came out of the water and pretty much went right back in again. This happens in our area for loggerheads about 50% of the time. So loggerheads are our dominant nesters here. Like I said before, huge loggerhead nesting population in Florida. And for these guys, they want to make sure the sand is right. It might be something as simple as a bright light scared them back in. It might be a tourist running down saying, ooh, ooh, sea turtle, trying to take their picture, that also scared them back into the water. So all these things, sometimes it's just not quite right. So the mom comes up, turns around, heads right back into the water without doing anything else. We do respond to strandings as well. So any sick, dead, injured sea turtle that we come across in Broward County, or anybody comes across in Broward County, we have a 24-hour-a-day, 365-day-a-year hotline. You can call us up and we will come out and respond to any of these stranded sea turtles. Any dead ones, we will document any injuries, anything that we see. Any live animals, we will quickly and efficiently transport to the nearest rehabilitation center to be able to get any care that they need to hopefully get them back out into the water again. In some cases, we will move nests. Sometimes mom doesn't do things quite as good as she would like. You can see this one, how close she is to the water line. This was actually below the high tide line. So the next high tide, that nest is going to get washed away. So in these special circumstances, we will actually dig that nest up very, very carefully, move the eggs to a safer location, dig another egg chamber to the same dimensions that mom made, place the eggs back in and bury it down to hopefully keep that clutch a little bit more, a little bit safer from where mom left those eggs in the first place. In some places like the Fort Lauderdale Strip and Hollywood Broadwalk, where we've got a lot of lighting issues, we are caging some of our nests. So this is, if you guys see these out there on the beach, this cage is placed over an egg chamber that's, getting ready to hatch. And they're designed so that when they come up, the eggs are going to, or the hatchlings will get caught in that net, rather than going out into the A1A or walking around the beaches for hours at a time. And then we'll actually go out every single night at sunset, close a little door on that cage, go out in the middle of the night, check them. If we have hatchlings, we'll take them out, release them into the water. And then we open up a little door on that cage. So if they happen to come out during the day, they won't be stuck in there and stuck in the sun all day. They can actually get out and head down to the water on their own. And of course, we do get some of those hatchlings then to be able to, take and release if they don't make it out on their own. So what we're doing, again, we're looking for these crawls, and the way they crawl on the beach, the way they dig their egg chambers can tell us what kind of sea turtle it is, whether it's a loggerhead, green, leatherback. Their nest characteristics are all a little bit different. So we can actually identify just based on what they did on the sand to figure out what kind of species those were that laid that nest. So we'll document that. Again, we mark off those egg chambers to make sure they're protected. The next morning, we mark that off. So if you see all these pink tape out there, these are all sea turtle nests that we've marked and are monitoring throughout the course of the season. About 2 months later, these nests are going to hatch. What that looks like, normally we've got these sea turtles, anywhere 80 to 120 eggs, sometimes in that nest chamber. They all hatch together. And sometimes they can be as much as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet below the surface. They're going to all kind of wiggle together. They all get right up to the surface, and then they're going to hatch, like you see here in the video, all at once, or leave the nest all at once, and they're going to crawl down the beach. Normally, this happens at night, just like the laying of the nest. This one we were very fortunate when this happened across from the survey, hatching out right early. So that's how we're able to get this footage just on our normal survey, and happen to be hatching during the day. So we're very, very lucky. That doesn't happen very often. But those guys will scurry down the beach, head out to the water. And then 3 days later, normally we would just see the flipper prints. 3 days later, we'll actually go in and dig up that nest. And this is again to get an idea of how successful the nest was, how many eggs were there, how many of them hatched, how many of them didn't hatch, how many babies made it out on their own. And then, of course, we do also recover any of the live babies that maybe got stuck behind with and didn't make it out with everybody else. So sometimes they may be just a little bit weaker than their brothers and sisters. Sometimes they might get stuck in a root or something like that, or just get a little bit sideways in the nest and don't come out with everybody else. So those animals we're going to hold and release that that evening that we've picked them up. So with our hatchlings, again, they all look a little bit different. So it's great over the course of the season to kind of see some of these guys. Our loggerheads are the smallest of our hatchlings that we get here often. The green turtle is a little bit bigger, and then the leatherbacks are actually quite big for being a brand new baby. Their eggs are a little bit smaller than, say, a softball or like a baseball size, where the greens and loggerheads are a little bit more like a ping pong ball size egg. So those leatherbacks do come out a little bit bigger than some of the others. But what does that mean? So we've got, lots of nests out here. Like I said, 80 to 120 eggs in those nests. How many of those are actually going to make it? And unfortunately, because of all those reasons we talked about before, all the predation, the pollution, habitat loss, about one out of every 1,000 hatchlings that makes to the water will survive to adulthood. So there's a huge loss, but that's why they lay so many nests and so many eggs over the course of the season to make sure some of those animals are coming back and keeping the population going. So I'm very happy to say we've been seeing over the last 30 years pretty steady increase in our nesting. So all of these conservation methods are working. We're seeing increases in nest numbers. We're seeing increases in hatchlings going back to the water, all those kinds of things. In 2019, we've had the highest nesting that we've had on record in the last 30 years. So this is in Broward County, we had 2,811 loggerheads, 787 green turtles, and 43 leatherbacks. So this is pretty standard. We have mostly loggerheads, a few, decent number of greens, and then far fewer of our leatherback sea turtles. So we had a little over 3,600 nests for that season. In 2020, we are still, we still have a month of season left. So we're still going to be bringing in a few more nests. We didn't quite make it to this high, but we did have another very successful season. Loggerheads were almost on point. The big change that we saw this year was in our green turtles. So green turtles, the females will actually only come back every couple of years, 2 to 3 years. So we see a very cyclical high year, low year, high year, low year with our green turtle nesting. So we expected to see a lower number of nests this year. With our leatherbacks, again, they were down a little bit from the past, and we will see more of these over the next month. So we're not quite to the end yet, but we are a little bit lower this year, but another fantastic season for us here in Broward County. So, that nesting beach work has been incredibly successful in many places around the world in helping protect these animals. And in Broward, we've had, with the Broward County Sea Turtle Program, we've had 30 years of monitoring, which is invaluable data to really understand how our populations are looking. But I'm excited to kind of tell you a little bit more about some of the new research we've got going on for the last just a couple of years. And that's actually the work of one of my graduate students, Glenn Goodwin. You can see in the picture down here. And he's been working to track the moms and try to figure out what these moms are doing once they leave our beaches here in Broward County. And what he's doing is using satellite tags to do that. So you can see this is a green turtle right on her back here. And what we saw out in the, at the environmental center as well, our tracking program, this is a satellite tag that we can actually follow these animals around. So this is a website you guys can look at anytime you want, turtletracking.org. I invite you to please take a look at that, follow our turtles. You can actually see, as we're learning about where these guys are going, you can be learning about where they go as well. So this satellite tag is a little computer we're sticking on the back of a turtle, and it's got an antenna on it. Anytime that antenna comes out, when they come up to breathe, it's going to ping a satellite, send us an email telling us where that turtle is anywhere in the world. So it's a great resource. For Glenn's project, we've been mainly working on our nesting beaches. So we go out and work overnight, all night long, usually go out about 8 or 9 in the evening, stay out till 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And we're looking for those nesting moms that are coming up here on our beaches. We wait till they come up, wait till they finish nesting and are headed back to the water. And at that point, we're going to capture them. This is one that's a loggerhead that we've caught and are going to put a tag on. This is a green turtle that's put in our little box here. Once in the box, we can take a lot of time to be able to measure, put tags on, like this satellite tag here on the back of her shell, collect all the data we need, tissue samples, blood samples, to get a good understanding of this particular female. And then after everything's set, we let her go. She heads back to the water, and that tag is going to continue telling us what's going on. We've also got some work starting down in Biscayne Bay National Park, trying to understand what those animals are looking like in the water. And to do that, things are a little bit more exciting, trying to catch these animals. We don't just walk up to them on the beach. We actually have to catch the turtles in the water. So this is a little video. You can see this light spot here is a sea turtle. Again, this is all highly trained, a lot of practice, a lot of permitting that goes into this. I do not recommend doing this at home, but to do this, to catch these animals in the wild, this is by far the fastest, most efficient, least stressful way to catch these animals in the water. So what we do is we give chase, drive around a perfectly good boat, jump off that boat, swim down, grab the turtle, and swim it back up to the surface. And this is very much in theory, I can promise you. Remember, these animals are 300, 400, 500 pounds, very well built to be in the water. We are not. So sometimes you get moved around a little bit, don't always get them to the boat. But when we do, we're not using a net or a hook or anything like that. It's going to trap them underwater. We get them to the surface very quickly, get them on the boat where we can do all those same things that we did on the beach. And then what we see is, over time, we can see where these guys are going. So this green dot here, right here in Broward County, is where all these animals were tagged. Again, you can find these on turtletracking.org, and you can follow our turtles. But this just kind of shows you some of the variation that we have. We've got some animals that just kind of hug the keys, come down here, they hang out in the nice lower, the Marquesas, lower keys, where there's a lot of nice seagrass, things like that. And they might come up into Florida Bay here. We've got some that have gone to the Bahamas. We've got some that have gone to Cuba. This is a loggerhead that made a quick swim all the way over here to the Yucatan, or over to Mexico. And so we see a pretty amazing movement pattern of where these guys are going. And that's something that, again, we have not really known. We know that when turtles show up here, but we didn't know where the females were coming from, how far they've traveled. And over the last couple of years and using these technologies, we're seeing some amazing things on where these guys are going. So I want to make sure we've got some time for questions here. So just one last little slide here of some of the things that you can do to help. Again, when you're out there, you want to make sure you're keeping your beaches and waterways free of trash. You want to make sure you're using any of those reusable bags, recycling. Don't release balloons and bags and things like that into the, out into the open, because that's going to end up in the water, going to end up somewhere where an animal can eat it. If you're out at night and you happen to see a nesting mother, please, please, please don't turn a flashlight on, don't turn a camera on or take pictures or anything like that. Stay far away from it. Let that mom do what she wants to do. I can imagine any ladies here tonight, if you are trying to give birth, you don't want somebody running in there and taking your picture or anything like that as well. So please don't do that to the moms. Let them have their peace. Let them do what they're going to do. They can be scared into the water. If you go out there and start taking pictures, they'll abandon egg chambers, things like that. So you want to make sure that you're leaving them alone. You want to minimize your lighting on the beaches. If you live there or have a business, make sure your lighting is turtle safe. And if you have any questions about that, please contact me. I can put you in contact with all the people that you would need to talk to make sure you're doing exactly what you need to do. You want to keep your blinds shut, because even that interior lighting will get out there as well. If you're out on your boat, make sure you're just paying good attention. You don't want to hit turtles or manatees or dolphins or anything that is up at the surface. And like we talked about before, fill in those holes, knock down your sandcastles, and make it a happy and healthy place for all of our animals out there on the beaches. So with that, I would love to take any questions that you guys might have. And I am going to stop sharing here just because I can't seem to pull up the chat thing as we're going. But I'm going to stop sharing and see if you guys have any questions for me.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Just great introductory presentation about sea turtles and especially their role here in South Florida. There was a lot there that I've been learning about sea turtles and things just kind of secondhand from guests like you and other people coming through the museum for years now. But there was still some things that I didn't know about there. Like I had never seen footage of going down and actually tagging the turtles. I can't imagine a method that more primitive than just diving into the water like that. That was pretty amazing. We've got a couple questions in the chat, but just to start with, I had a couple of things that I was curious about. Just as we were saying, with all the obstacles of being a sea turtle, both a nesting sea turtle and a hatchling, of making it from one way or the other to, there's just so many obstacles in front of you, both from humans and just in the natural world. And with our coastline here in South Florida, especially Broward County, there's a really wide variation of what the beach is going to look like. Like we host a lot of our beach cleanup events down at Bondi Misley Eula Johnson State Park, down by the Halmos Institute, where the beach is always very eroded, very thin coastline. And then I live in Pompano Beach, and the beach is very wide sand, but a lot of development right on A1A. And then just a lot of points in between that. Sometimes it's very densely populated, like down by Las Olas or something. But just in my general observations, it seems like there's always nests wherever I am in the peak of season. But I'm curious to know if, because of some of those obstacles, like where it's more developed than not, where the beach is thinner than not, where there might be more erosion, regardless of whether we're seeing nests there, is there difference between the success rates of those nests in those areas?
Yeah, so there, in Broward anyway, we see a bit of a trend, and kind of across Florida beaches, at least on the East Coast, we see, like in Miami-Dade has lower numbers that we do. So our Hollywood beaches are sort of our lowest density beaches, over say a 4-mile stretch in sort of the Hollywood area. We might have 200 nests over the course of a season. In our Hillsborough Deerfield, which is our northernmost beaches, over 4 miles there, we might have 1,500 nests. So we do see pretty big differences across. In Hollywood, we've got a lot of lights. In Hillsborough and Deerfield, it's much more, sort of private land, much darker beaches. So there's probably a lot of things that go into that. But then, as you move further up the coast, and especially when you get up to places like Martin County, Canaveral, places like that, there's extremely dense nesting up there. That's some of the densest nesting, well, certainly in Florida and in the US, where you might have 20,000 nests over the course of a season on some of their beaches. So very, very different kind of across Florida. But yeah, we will see, some of those thinner beaches, they may not have as much room to work with. So if they can't get further away, they might experience more washover where some of the higher high tides or some of these larger wave events, you might see washing over the nests or maybe even washing out of those nests. Where in, say, the south end of Fort Lauderdale or something like that, where we have a very wide beach, if those animals do move further away, those eggs are going to have a better chance of hatching. So we do see a little bit of that, in areas around some of our piers, our fishing piers and stuff. We see that there isn't as much nesting in those areas. They sort of shy away from it, whether that's the lighting or just the way the water moves around those piers. Don't really know exactly what causes that, but we do see some variation kind of across our beaches for sure.
Great, thank you. Looks like we got a couple of questions in the chat I want to go to. I have a couple of people that were asking, as you were talking about the tagging process, diving into the water and stuff. A couple of people wanted to know if that happens before or after that turtle has laid their nest.
Yeah, so the tagging on our nesting beaches, we absolutely wait till they're done nesting for sure. We don't interrupt that. We make sure they are doing everything they're going to do. They've covered, they've packed their nest down. They've done all the things they're going to do, and they're actually making their way back to the water before we will touch that animal. So she's done everything she's going to do before we get involved for sure.
Okay, and this one comes from Robin wanting to know around what time of night do hatches typically happen?
It can be really any time from sunset to sunrise. It just depends. There's so many factors involved. It can be any time in there. There's really no good set time to go out and try to see them or anything like that. It can be any time. So it's very much a luck sort of situation to be able to see something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm someone I've always loved going to the beach in the evening, like when there's not a lot of people around and it's more quiet and peaceful and stuff. And there's been a few occasions where I have encountered a turtle coming up to the beach. Like one of those times I was like kind of sitting right down by the water and a turtle came up to lay a nest like right in front of me. Yep. And had to turn around, and I didn't know what I could do about that. It was, a pretty luck of the draw where they were going to come up, and it was where the one person on the beach was sitting. So it's
absolutely,
you can only do so much, but do whatever you can. So looks like we got one more question here. This one comes from Alex. When you rescue a turtle or any other sea creature, do you name the turtle?
All right, so that's a great question. The ones that do go to like a rehabilitation center, yeah, those are ones that are going to get named. And that's really just to make it easier for the crew at the rehab center. They want to talk about crunch and whatever rather than 1, 2, 3, or 4. It just makes it easier for them. For a lot of our satellite tracking, especially for the same reasons, we do name those just so that it's easier for us to think about as we're following them on the website and looking at their movements. All the other ones that we work with that maybe just get a flipper tag or a pit tag that don't have that active satellite tracker on it, those ones we aren't going to name as much, but they will get their flipper tag numbers that we can identify them by. But those ones that are a little more actively looked at, like the satellite tracks, then those ones we do name. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we definitely have a resident sea turtle at Mods named George.
Yep.
I'm not sure what George's like satellite tag or official coding is, but a friend of mine and yours. Looks like we have another question from Alex, just real quick. How many species of sea turtles are there in the world?
Yeah, great question. So there are 7 species worldwide, and we do get 5 of those here in South Florida. The 3 that nest, the loggerhead, green, and leatherback, and then 2 more in the water, the hawksbill and Kemp's Ridley. And then there's also the olive ridley that we don't get here in Florida, and the Australian flatback, which is only found in a small area of Australia.
Okay, and another question from Joe. How long do the satellite tags last once you put them on the turtle?
Good question. There's a huge range. They can go anywhere from a few days to over 3 years. And that depends largely on the animal and also the tag in general. They've gotten much better. We usually, we usually hope to get about a year out of them. Sometimes something might happen where they might take it straight into a rock and knock it off, and then it would last maybe a few days, or we've had some of them that report for, like I said, over 3 years. And it just depends on the particular turtle, how they move, how rough they are on it, if they break the antenna off, if the way they work is they've actually got little metal discs on them that when it's out of the water and it's not, those two discs aren't connected by salt water, that's when it'll transmit. So it'll say that it's out of the water and dry. If those get grown over with a bunch of algae, then it may not realize that it's out of the water, and so it might not transmit quite as well. So there's lots of things that can go wrong. You literally are strapping a little computer on the back of a sea turtle and sending it out into the wild. So lots of things can go wrong. But like I said, we shoot for about a year, but we have gotten much longer than that as well.
Okay, looks like we got a couple more questions. Alex and Andrew asking, do the tags fall off on their own?
They do, yeah. So they are glued on the shell, but the carapace or the shell of the turtle, they grow and do slough off the outer layer over time. So it'll take several years usually, but that tag will eventually fall off of them over time.
Okay, this one comes from Ronnie. How often do turtles reproduce and nest? I know you touched on that a little bit, but just.
Yeah. So an individual female usually comes back every 2 to 3 years, something like that. And the reason for that is when they do come to nest, like it might be a far travel from where their normal feeding grounds are. So it's a lot of energy to get here, but it's also a lot of energy for the nesting, because an individual female will lay anywhere from 3 to 7, 8, 9 nests over the course of a season, sometimes even more. And so they'll lay a nest, they'll go back out for a couple of weeks, build a new batch of eggs, another 80 to 120 eggs, come back in, drop another clutch or another group of those eggs, stay in the nearshore habitat for another 2 weeks, come back in, drop another nest. So it's huge energy input to be able to do that over the course of the season. And that's, females will come back every couple of years because of that little bit of a break in between.
Okay, look, we got a pretty good question from Robin here that I'm kind of curious to hear about too. Did the turtles ever do something on purpose to remove the tag? Are they aware of the tag's presence? Does it bother them in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, from everything we've seen, I don't think it's something that that impacts them, or, it's something that's a small thing on their back, especially loggerheads and some of these species, they'll grow barnacles sometimes similar to the size of some of these tags. And so it's not something that really they're purposely trying to knock off, but something, like a loggerhead or a hawksbill that spends a lot of time tucked up in the reef, they might bang it on a rock while they're swimming underneath and eventually knock it off. But it's not going to be, at least in sea turtles, it's not something that they're actively trying to knock off. There was a group called Critter Cam with National Geographic. They designed a camera system that they mounted on whales and dolphins and sharks and sea turtles and seals and lions and all kinds of stuff around the world. And when they tried to put them on dolphins, those animals absolutely did know what it was, or knew that something was there that they didn't want there. They would immediately swim to the bottom and knock their fin into the bottom of it until they could knock that camera off and continue on their day. But for the sea turtles, it's nothing like that. They may accidentally knock them off about going about their daily business, but it's not something that impacts them really in any way.
Okay. Well, yeah, we had a question about feeding George that our life sciences manager, Matt, actually just got to. We feed George fish, shrimp, and live small blue crabs. Not sure if you have a different diet going on with Captain down at the MEEC.
Yeah, she gets leafy green lettuce, romaine, cucumbers, green peppers, and a little sea turtle multivitamin to round it out to get what she would absolutely need in the wild. So.
Yeah, George and Catherine both seem to have a good time where they're at. So seems like we're just about out of time here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you enjoyed what you saw here tonight, please come back for our future Distinguished Speaker Series events. We have a great talk about manta rays coming up on November 5th, and a panel discussion about sharks on December 6th, or December 3rd, sorry. And we'll be rescheduling our panel discussion on sea turtle conservation for January. Stay tuned for details on that. Thank you, Dr. Derek Burkholder of Nova Southeastern University, the Marine and Environmental Education Center, Guy Harvey Institute. We could probably do a whole presentation on your resume alone, but thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Derek, for coming in and presenting great research, great information about sea turtles. A lot to be aware of, especially